You've heard this before, but I think the day is coming where you'll have people with $1 billion of assets under management in a one person team. Why not? So that's the potential. It also allows for people to do things on the side at a higher scale than they could before, because the time was the big limiter. But if you can unlock time with technology like this, all of a sudden that free time becomes much more efficient.
What's up, guys? It's Ron from Ronald Law, and I'm really excited to sit down with a good friend, Spencer Burton, who is also a Cornell graduate. But I've known Spencer for, over 10 years now, and throughout everything, he has always been at the forefront of institutional real estate and technology. So we're going to sit down today and talk about what are institutions and what are the actual use cases for AI, define AI, and just kind of walk us through how people are using technology to underwrite and buy real estate. So, Spencer, thanks for joining.
Yeah, Ron, really good to be here. I think this is a technology that will fundamentally change our industry. There's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of noise. A lot of the promises haven't yet been met. I think that's real. There are some caution that I would have. At the same time, I'm incredibly excited about where this technology will take all of us. And I think on par, it's a positive for our industry and for each one of us professionally. So excited to dig into this.
Yeah, I think I have a unique perspective as a practicing lawyer with my own law firm, and then as well on the investing side, because I do think that I maybe speak for a lot of people that are underwriting and buying deals on their nights and weekends, and that's what I do, and that time is so precious and limited. So I'm really excited to see what the presentation has about actual tools that people are using today. So.
So the great unlock of this technology is, well, there's a few great unlocks, but the biggest to me is that each one of us can create bespoke capabilities. And when you can create bespoke capabilities at scale, what that means is you can develop your own team that does things specific to your way, highly efficiently. So someone such as yourself, where practicing attorney but a real estate investor on the side. Although you're more than just a real estate investor on the side, it's incredible what you've built over the last decade or more. You can build a real business with a relatively small team, and so you've heard this before, but I think the day is coming where you'll have people with $1 billion of assets under management in a one person team. Why not? So that's the potential. It also allows for people to do things on the side at a higher scale than they could before, because the time was the big limiter. But if you can unlock time with technology like this, all of a sudden that free time becomes much more efficient. Those who have a full-time job but want to explore something of interest in their part-time can do something much bigger than they could before. So that's the big unlock for this. Doing bespoke things and freeing up time to tackle interests. So
Yeah, well, that's exciting too. And then, at the quality, I think that's the biggest holdup from me. And I'll admit I'm behind the curve on where the technology is, but the quality has just leaps and bounds. And I've seen some of the renderings and the language, but having consistent quality and be feeling really good about asking ChatGPT what the zoning of a certain property is, and then it's being accurate. It just needs to be accurate probably 90% of the time. But when it does that, it's so much better where I can feed the input, right? I feed the exact zoning map and the code, and then later I can just ask it a street address and it spits it back out. So
sure, the capability of the capabilities of those foundation models continue to improve, and that's helpful. But also our understanding of their limitations improve. And so once you understand limitations, you can explore solutions to those limitations. And so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing more and more groups that are finding solutions to limitations. Once you solve that, then it becomes incredibly useful. So you want me to get into the presentation, or
let's
how?
see it. Let's see it.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is a presentation I've given several times to different groups, and what I explore here is artificial intelligence in the context of our industry, commercial real estate. I think it's important to note that artificial intelligence for purposes of this presentation, really refers to generative AI. So this idea of models that generate something from a prompt in many cases, and that prompt is usually text. And what that produces may be additional text. So that would be a large language model. You give it a text like, what is the capital of France? And it will come back with some text in response. And hopefully that text is accurate. But whether it's accurate or not is a function of the training data that underlines that model. But there are other generative cases. So you can do text to image. So ChatGPT, we'll stay on that because we've talked about that already, has its own text to image model embedded. And so you could say something like, give me an image of the capital of France, and it will come back with an image. And the quality of that image and the accuracy of that image, again, will be a function of the training that underlines that model. And there are numerous generative models that exist, and the input often is text, but not always. There are image to video, there are image to text, there are video to text, right? But all of them at their core are generating something new from that prompt. Now, the generation process at its simplest form is just simply it's predicting the next thing in a string. So in the case of a text to text, a large language model, it's literally predicting the next 4 characters, one after another, to produce a sentence and then a paragraph and then something that is or isn't valuable. In the same way, text to image is producing or generating or predicting the next pixel in an image. So that when again, in this presentation, when I refer to AI, that's what I'm referring to. Now, there's been these transformations over time. And anytime you have a transformation, you see a fundamental change in society. And so you think about the changes that the printing press brought about, or the automobile, or the internet or smartphone, right? And each time that happens, you sit a decade or 2 or 3 into the future and you go, what? How can I can even imagine life without email? Email became possible because of the internet. I couldn't even imagine life without the personal computer. And yet there was a time not that long ago where the paradigm was different. And the great visual that I really appreciate, and some of you who are watching this may have seen this before, but I love this visual. So what you're looking at here is a picture of Fifth Ave, New York City, Easter morning, 1900. And the challenge for you is to spot the automobile. In this sea of horse and buggies, spot the automobile, and it's right there. Okay. So you see the automobile, all these horse and buggies, and you can imagine people sitting in that street. That automobile was likely a novelty. And there were likely people on that street that went, wow. They would come up with all the reasons for why that automobile would never populate that street. But there was a forward-thinking person on this street, at least that we can see, either that had the financial wherewithal or the social wherewithal, whatever, to buy the automobile and drive it here on Fifth Ave. Now, fast forward just 13 years later, also Easter morning, also Fifth Ave, New York City. And now the challenge is spot the horse and buggy in that sea of automobiles. And there it is. There's the horse and buggy. And that person probably at this point feels quite behind. Again, whether they don't have the financial wherewithal or they don't have the social wherewithal or what have you, they continue to ride their horse and buggy. You now today would never see a horse and buggy. Well, not in the context of an average driver, although you'll see horse and buggies for novelty, right? For tourists. So you see in a very short amount of time, 1900 to 1913. By the way, at a moment where word did not spread in the way that it does today. Things tended to move at a slower pace then. And so you say, okay, you have this transformational technology hit the scene over the last X number of years. And I say X number of years because I think in the broader mind, generative AI didn't really happen until ChatGPT arrived in what was that, 2022. And when it arrived, all of a sudden, we all went, wow, there's something that could make my life easier or it could help me with whatever. And it seemed magical. That was 3 years ago. We're sitting here, summer of 2025, and you go, okay, what does life look like 10 years from now? And when I say life, I'm really talking about us as real estate professionals. What does life look like for us 10 years from now? And that's where I would prefer to spend the balance of this presentation. Now, what I'll first say is, again, a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of promises that haven't yet been fulfilled, plenty of healthy skepticism. And you, Ron, even raised it. It's like, okay, it's only X% accurate. And there's been some studies that show that its accuracy depends on the complexity of the task, but also the length of time that a task would take. And so today, again, summer of 2025, what these studies show is that a task that a human would take generally about 30 minutes to perform right now, one of these models is about 60% accurate, 60 to 70% accurate in its ability to perform that task. And I think in terms of tasks, because for our industry, what we're really looking for is for these things to take on highly repetitive tasks on our behalf. And so now you go, okay, I have a benchmark. If I've got a 30-minute task, I should be able to count on this technology to help me to some degree. Whether that 60 to 70% means that it could reduce a 30-minute task to a 5 to 10-minute task, or whether it means that I need to fix errors 30, 40% of the time. Either way, I would argue that even that sort of accuracy, if we don't deploy the technology, means that we are letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. If I could use a technology that reduces something that I do on a somewhat repetitive basis from 30 minutes to 10 minutes, you'd be crazy not to use that technology to do that. That's 3 times the clients that you could take on if you're a real estate attorney, right? That's 3 times the deals you could analyze if you're a real estate analyst. And if I'm in real estate and I can look at 3 times as many deals in a month, that means either I can close 3 times as many deals, or the counter to that is the quality of the deals that I'm closing is better. Now, I'm in this because I helped launch a tech-forward real estate private equity firm prior to really generative AI hitting the broader scene. And we developed in-house what I would consider a digital coworker that early on used very rudimentary deterministic type automation techniques. It's called robotic process automation, but very kind of linear automation techniques. But then as generative AI hit the scene, the capabilities of those internal tools grew. But even in an RPA world, we were underwriting 10 times the number of assets that we otherwise would be able to underwrite because we were using these type of technologies. And absolutely, it's possible for people today to use this technology and other technologies to greatly improve their efficiency and therefore increase the number of deals they're closing, increase the number of clients that they're serving, and so forth. But let's get into, so again, 2025, what is real? And this is from my perspective, what I'm seeing, what's real. First off, AI language assistance. Okay. So this would be ChatGPT. ChatGPT, absolutely real. I think most of us understand its limitations. And as soon as you understand its limitations, you can unlock the capabilities that it has. So when you think about ChatGPT and other tools like it, Claude, Gemini, they all have come out with subset of tools that allow us to get the max out of these large language models. Things like custom GPTs or projects. I think they're called gems with Gemini. And these are tuned versions of these tools. So you say, okay, I want to take ChatGPT, but have it focus on writing just like me. So what you're seeing is a screenshot of my custom GPT. I'm the only one who has access to it. It's Spencer's Ghostwriter. And I write everything from email responses to Slack messages to blog posts to LinkedIn posts. The first draft and then subsequent drafts come out of this ghostwriter. And I've got the ghostwriter is tuned to write like me. And what that meant was I had a process feeding it thousands of LinkedIn messages that I'd written, emails that I'd written, blog posts that I'd written, and using that to learn how I write, such that the next email or the next LinkedIn post mimics the last 1,000 emails or LinkedIn posts. That's the first step. But then beyond that, it's actually understanding how to use it. So I would almost never use the very first version that came out of this ghostwriter. Even though this ghostwriter's already been tuned up to write a lot like me, it's still going to have things like M dashes that make it obviously AI. And so I'll take that and then I'll just iterate back and forth. And in the end, I mean, will it save me time? Absolutely. It does save me time, especially with long form writing. But I get a level of consistency that I appreciate. Does things like, so I have Calendly links. So anytime I'm wanting to set up an appointment, I have something that I always write, which is because Calendly, if you're unfamiliar with Calendly, it's like a auto scheduler. It's like, hey, here's a link. Find time on my calendar that works. Well, it feels a little selfish. Maybe I'm oversensitive to it, but oftentimes when I send out a Calendly, it feels a little like, hey, look on my calendar and find a time that works. And so I've always used this phrase, which is I use Calendly to simplify meeting coordination. Find a time that works for you, and the system will do the rest. And what it implies is, hey, this actually serves both of us. It saves you time. System does everything else, right? So there's that thing that I always write. And before I built this ghostwriter, I remember feeling like I do this like it feels like dozens of times a week. And so that's one of the little tiny quirks or little wrinkles that this is tuned to. So it will always, when it knows when it's setting up a meeting, it will automatically put the Calendly link in, and it automatically adds some little blurb kind of like that softens it and makes it feel what it is, which is it actually simplifies this for both of us. It's not just like, okay, let's do something that makes Spencer's life simpler. Anyway, so these tools, large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and a whole host of others, very real today in 2025. Next is coding for non-coders. So if you follow kind of how I'm thinking about AI on, say, Adventures in CRE or my LinkedIn, I've shared a handful of these examples. And I could share one here, Ron, if you're curious. But basically, we could open up one of these coding for non-coders tools. V0 is an example, Lovable is an example, Bolt.new is an example, and we together could build an app in a matter of minutes. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to pull open a browser window, and I'm just going to go to lovable.dev. Okay. Now we're
Let
going to
me
put very
pardon,
little thought
Spencer.
into. Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to bite my tongue, but do you think this is okay if we just have more of a dialogue on your presentation too? Like,
Please, I'd
okay,
love that.
okay.
It'd be great.
All right, because I've been biting my tongue. I was like, oh, I want to let Spencer do his thing, but I could still edit this anyway. Super fascinating. And do you agree with this that the skill is not coding? You don't need to learn how to code anymore. You have to learn how to prompt. And people who are really good prompters are going to know different syntax and different language keywords that trigger searches in the correct database or exclude knowledge that the model has because you're intentional saying ignore this data.
You're absolutely right. Prompting is one of the key skills that unlocks this technology for all of us. And this is a good example of that, right? So we arrive at, have you used Ron Lovable?
I've never seen this before. No.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a tool that it's a coding tool. It's but for non-coders like us. Okay. So when I say us, we're subject matter experts. So we know what the output looks like. We know what good is when it's done. We know how to instruct someone to build it for us, but we don't know how to actually build it. Okay, that's the coding piece of this. And you're absolutely right about prompting. So I could come here and I could produce this first prompt, but it's much more efficient to actually have a conversation with a large language model. I'd like to build a simple amortization table web app in Lovable. I need help drafting my initial prompt to Lovable. What questions do you have about the app I want to build? Right. So what I'm starting here is a back and forth Q&A, because ultimately my large language model, in this case, ChatGPT, is going to produce for me the prompt that I'll end up giving. And think of the prompt as instructions to my coding assistant, which just happens to be an AI.
The
And in the
lovable is
same way
more
that,
like an
yeah, go ahead.
expert, right? The
Yeah.
lovable is a super expert, and the LLM is telling you how to talk to the expert.
Yeah, that's exactly how to think about it. So what you'll notice in my first prompt to ChatGPT, what I wanted to do is ask me the questions that I need to have answered before it produces the prompt. So it starts like, what input should the user provide on UX considerations, branding, tech. Now, we don't have time to go through all of these, so I'm just going to say, this is for testing. So please answer the questions yourself based on your best judgment. So it's actually going to answer the questions for us because we don't have time for this. And here it comes through, and it's going to have its inputs: design, gay great, UX considerations, branding, styling. And they actually call this reasoning. So it's this idea of ask a question, answer the question before producing a prompt. So I just injected reasoning into a conversation. And then notice it went ahead and drafted the prompt for us. Build a simple amortization calculator web app. The user will enter these things. When the form is submitted, generate a monthly amortization table showing for each month these things. Also show this. Include a download CSV button to export the table. Style should be clean, right? So this is what ChatGPT produced in terms of a prompt. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this.
So let me dig into one line here, because I saw it where it was already in your stuff, because it said, do you want this to be ACRE or CRE agents branded? And then
Yeah.
when you told it to make its own decision, how did it decide to do no branding? Because it clearly knows that you have a preference for other types of branding, but how did it choose to do no branding? It's a logical answer. I think it's a good answer, but
Yeah. I don't know, right? It's predictive. So how it knows about ACRE and CRE agents is I use this tool dozens of times a day. And it has memory. I won't get into the technical how that works, but it has memory. In short, every conversation I've ever had with it, it can use as part of producing its next response, as part of predicting its next 4 characters. And so I don't know the answer exactly to that, but that's a good observation. Which branding it would use. In this case, it's just a generic branding. So let's go ahead. I'm going to copy this prompt. Let's drop it in. This is going to take about 5 minutes. And what's going to happen is it's first going to digest my prompt. That's what's happening in working. It's actually going to reason itself. So it's going to ask itself some questions, and it's going to think about what it should produce. And then it will start writing code. So let's hold off. It'll take about 5 minutes for it to write. So here it starts reasoning. I'll create a sleek amortization calculator with all the features you requested. This will be a single page app with clean form, blah, 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 right? Just kind of repeats, and then it begins writing the code. And it will write dozens of files when we see this in the end. So let's stop. I'll pull back to the presentation slide. But these coding for non-coders is very real. Now, let me caution those who are listening and watching. Again, we're sitting June 2025. No doubt that 10 years from now, software developers as we know them will no longer exist. That doesn't mean that there won't be a place for developers, but their role will be very different than it is today. The other thing that this means is that those of us who understand what our end output looks like can be much closer to that output than we are pre these tools. So we can create things that we never could have created before at a much faster scale. I think a great example of this is at CRE Agent. So we were working on launching our front end. So the front end is the thing that the user uses. So we had our back end done, and we needed the front end. And the front end is user interface, user experience. Actually, it's done. That was quick. I don't know if you heard the. Sorry about that. Let's see.
That was faster than 5 minutes, though.
Yeah, that was faster than 5 minutes. That was a quick one. So produced our little web app. Let me stop and just share. So let's put a loan amount of $5 million. Let's do an interest rate of 6.5%. We'll do 30-year term, and I don't know, start date of July 1. So it produces the amortization table, total payments, total interest, monthly payment. Here's the schedule itself. And then there should be a download CSV. There we go.
That is slick.
So that is a web app. And I could then deploy this to a domain, spencersamortizationtable.com. I could create a user database such that you had to authenticate. You had to sign in order, log in order to access it. I could wrap a Stripe payment to that. So you have to pay me $1 a month to get access to Spencer's amortization calculator. Not that anyone would pay for this because these things are widely available online for free. You get the point. In a matter of minutes, you and I built an amortization table. And so you extrapolate that to any number of use cases for practitioners. It's pretty amazing what you can do. Okay, that's coding for non-coders. Any last thoughts, Ron, before we go to the next?
My only other question was, you had a couple typos. What happens to the output in the LLM if you had left your typo? So you typed what and you hit Q, HAT.
Yeah.
What would have happened to the output? Is it identical, or is it?
It's identical. It's identical. You know, these things are so good these days that they know exactly. I never correct typos when I'm prompting, unless it changes the meaning. But yeah,
that's what I was trying to think. And it's no different than talking to a human. If I have an assistant sitting at my desk and I say, what will that be? Or if I say, the I don't know. I'm trying to think of a word that has two meanings that would change, but like across the property or the premise, show me a picture of the building or the property. That has a connotation in leases and whether it's a multiple building property. That person would have a reasonable output, but they might ask you, do you mean the building or the property, as a follow-up question? And that's a case where the typo could lead to ambiguity, but it also produces one.
Yeah, that can happen. Now, these things have gotten smart enough where they'll often infer what's accurate. So you might say, like, for instance, you have a conversation where you're talking about New York City, and then you get down into the conversation, you accidentally refer to it as Chicago. It will likely catch that and say, are you intending to change to Chicago, or are we still talking about New York City? Just like a person would, right?
Yeah.
They've gotten very good at those sorts of things. Yeah. So anyway, so coding, very real. Now, this is called vibe coding. You'll quickly run into its limitations, which is, so we created that really cool amortization table. As you start editing it, as you start creating more and more complexity, it starts breaking down. But you can see where the future lies in terms of coding. Another is AI image fine tuning. So you're looking here at two images. These are AI generated. 100% AI generated.
Prompt.
Both of them are. And how this works is I fine-tuned a Flux One model with 15 images of my face, and now I can produce unlimited headshots of myself, professional headshots for free. And that's very real. Look up Flux One. Anyone can do this. It costs a few pennies and a conversation with ChatGPT as your like tutor on how to do this, and you're off and running. Another one is image generation. And all of us have played with image generation now, so this is pretty table stakes. But on the left, you have an actual image. On the right, you have an AI generated image of the same living room and kitchen, but with a prompt that asks to renovate it with laminate floor and whatever, right? Let's change the kitchen around. So this was a prompt from left to right. Take the actual image. Let's see what this could look like if we made some changes. Very real. The other thing it's gotten very good in 2025 is you now can produce text in images where you couldn't before. So the text is very good in images nowadays. So this is very real. Audio generation, if it'll work.
So let's talk about where we are today in terms of AI.
You heard that?
Yeah.
Sounds like me.
Sounds like your voice.
Okay. This was 4 hours of my voice and 11 labs. Anyone can do this. It costs $20, and you have then your own AI model. Now, on the one hand, it's a little scary. So when I created this, I gathered my kids together and I said, I'm creating this, and we created a safe word. Maybe that's a little paranoid, but you never know, right? This leaks out somehow to someone. There's several members of my team at CRE who have access to this. When they need to edit videos and they don't want to have to track me down, they can use my voice now to modify something. And so there's a dystopian view on this and there's a utopian view. And I kind of sit somewhere in the middle. This is incredibly valuable when you need your voice to play something. Another thing I did, maybe this is silly, but I was traveling a fair amount, and my wife, we hadn't seen each other for a little while. We've been married over 20 years now. And she was going on this trip with her sisters soon thereafter. And she loves to do books, an audiobook. And so I found one of her books. Maybe this wasn't legal and I shouldn't say this, but I found one of her books and I created an audio version with my voice reading this book for her that she could, and I gave it to her. And she found it more silly and funny than anything else. But, there are fun use cases like that. But
Did she listen to the whole thing, though?
Yeah, I did the whole book.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent several hours turning a book into.
But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's always going to require some human element. This reminds me of like those scam texts where somebody will say like, "Hey, Spencer, this is really urgent. I'm in a meeting. I need a favor." And you're like, "Oh, what's up, Ron?" And you're like, "I need to send these gift cards. Can you go buy some Apple gift cards and send it to this email address?" That doesn't matter if it's a phone call with voice or a text message, or if it's a video of me imploring Spencer, please help me right now. It's an emergency. I need you to buy $400 of Apple gift cards and send them to this WhatsApp address. There has to be some human digestion of like, is this a scam? And it doesn't matter, in a weird way, even if my brother was standing in front of me, flesh and blood, and he said like, "Hey, I need $100,000 of Bitcoin and I need it urgently," I would know that there's something wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, no matter how realistic it gets, there has to be this human judgment of this doesn't fit the pattern of years of knowledge.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We can no longer trust that the outputs that we're getting are real. And I think that was the message to my kids. It's actually a good message for them who are going to grow up in this world. It's like, my voice may not be my voice. My face may not be my face. My video of me or your mom may not be us. And use your best judgment. You're smart. If I'm asking you to send me money through, gift cards, okay, come on. But at minimum, we have the safe. That's our safeguard right now. Is the safe word.
Because I'm not going to rely on community notes, Instagram to tell me is this A or not. Because as soon as somebody figures out how to do AI fact checking, somebody will figure out how to beat it. Somebody will find
That's right.
the weak spot. And so I don't know, it kind of sucks. You can't believe that anymore. But we had this issue 50 years ago, 75 years ago, when the first photographs, and somebody gave you a photograph of Nessie, of Loch Ness, or even like bombs exploding over Germany. How did we know that those weren't doctored?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds cynical, but we didn't change our lives based on potential Photoshop. You just trusted the sender. I don't know. Sometimes with bad consequences, though.
Yeah. Yeah. These are all the social challenges that we'll confront as this technology becomes more and more prevalent. So that's AI audio generation. Another one that's very real, video generation. So, for instance, with OpenAI Sora, I gave it an image. That was my prompt. Was just an image. This is Wells Fargo building in Minneapolis, and it produced this image or this video. Okay, yeah, it's a quick video. It's not incredibly impressive, which is wild for us to say in this day and age that you get like pixels auto generated, but you get a video from an image. Okay, but you can also, let's see if this one. Okay, so this one, not particularly good, but it kind of gives you a sense of where things are going. So I took this AI generated image, I took this audio, and I produced this video. So let me move my mic over here and I'll play it for you.
So let's talk about where we are today in terms of AI for commercial real estate.
I mean, the
Okay, so
timing is there. Your mouth is opening at the right timing. I think it's the degree, right? You have like for just a where your mouth is only halfway open, but it is much better than some of the earlier stuff that was, you know, just
yeah.
chatter.
What is really good is the video generation. So ignore the audio for a bit because the audio doesn't match up, like you said, as well as it could. Now, we've all seen the videos of where people spend hours and they get it right. What you just saw was a matter of minutes. That was here's the picture, here's the audio, and I use Kling AI's lip sync feature, and in a couple minutes it generated that. Someone who'd spend some time could actually produce something that would be real. But to me, what is good is the video generation. So that was just simply this picture right here, that picture, and it turned it into that video. And so again, I turn off the sound now, and you see the hands, the posture, the teeth, like all of that was generated. It had none of that context, and it produced it on its own in its best judgment. Pretty amazing. And that's 10 seconds. What if I turn that into three minutes? What that might look like.
Yeah. And so when you say spending additional time, you would have added to the prompt to say, take this video and sync it to the audio, but maybe put a black wristwatch on instead of the silver. That's what you're saying by adding time.
No, what I'm really referring to is, so the people who have mastered this, this isn't something I do on a day-to-day basis. This is something I put together real quick. They use a variety of tools to get the voice and the lips to sync up perfectly. They use some upscaling there were some jitters. I don't know if you saw it, to make the jitters go away. And they can make it such that it truly looks like I'm saying the words that I'm saying in this scene. That's what I'm referring to. And that would take
So maybe like breaking it up into shorter clips until it's perfect.
Probably.
Keep iterating.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are tutorials on YouTube though, if you're interested. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal where I forget her name, but she's one of the tech writers, and she created a video, an AI generated video.
I saw that.
You saw it. It's really clever. And
My
she
Robot and
describes
Me
how
or
they did it.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she had like a professional video producer that helped her.
Yes.
Yeah, she still said it was a ton. ton of time, but she said it was what? It was no real images. She did a little bit of audio. We're talking about the same one, right? My Robot.
Same one. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so first off, she said they produced thousands of videos in order to create their, I don't know, 2-minute clip. But I think she said it was the equivalent of like $10,000 and a few weeks of work. But that clip would have cost hundreds of thousands of
Right.
dollars
Right.
and months of work before. So, and again, 10 years from now, what does this all look like? Pretty amazing. So where are we today in terms of commercial real estate? Now, I think of us as practitioners, whether on the legal side or on the real estate investing side. My visual for how we perform our work is that of like a switchboard operator. And 100 years ago or so, when a call was made, let's say I'm sitting here in Miami, my friend Ron's sitting in Dallas. I want to call you, Ron. I ring up my phone and it hits a person. And that person routes my call to somewhere else, which I think from Miami to you probably would have had several people in the mix that would have routed that call. And that's similar to us sitting in our seat in real estate. An offering memorandum comes in. I route data to an Excel file. I then maybe route that data also to an Argus box somewhere. I then route it to an investment committee memo. Maybe I route it to an email that goes out, right? And so I'm sitting there and there's all this structured and unstructured data, and someone has to organize it and shift it from point A to point B. And we have some tools to help us. So I imagine a switchboard operator as phone calls increased, they probably implemented tools to make their job easier. So maybe they had more comfortable chairs so they could take more calls. Maybe they had a more efficient way to pick up calls. Maybe they had like smoother, right? Because they pulled pins out and they put pins in. Maybe they had easier pins that allowed them to do that quicker. I don't know what tools they use. Our tools are, we've got these single point solutions. Many of them are powered by AI. We've got prop tech web apps that make our life a little easier. And then we have these generalist AI platforms like ChatGPT that have hit the scene that help. But we're still sitting in the seat. We're still routing data from one place to another, even if we're more efficient.
And I'll tell you,
That's where we're sitting today, and there's nothing wrong with that.
and the number one objection that I hear, and it's something that's solvable, but oh, our data is so disparate. There is zero standardization. I might get a PDF one day, the next day I get a PN, an image, a JPEG image. Oh, I got a CO, it's blurry. Oh, I got this, and the naysayers will say it's so complicated. There's no standardization. How can we, we're an essential part of the job to interpret this wide range of data with varying levels of credibility too. That's something that I've heard a lot is you're skeptical of OM data. You don't treat it the same as county tax assessor data.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's a fair concern point. I have two comments to it. The first is this technology is better at taking unstructured data and structuring it than any technology we've had to date. So, and by the way, right now, until this technology, who structures unstructured data? People. This technology is far better than people at structuring unstructured data. So that's number one. For the first time in our industry, we have the opportunity to, at scale, structure our data. The second is because this technology can be customized quickly and efficiently and cheaply, if cheaply is a word, you don't need like an industry standard for anything. It'd be nice. I was on a podcast a few months ago and someone's like, hey, if you could snap your fingers and have something exist, what it would be? And I was like, a standardization for data across our industry. I wish that we all agreed on the same standard, whatever, for everything. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. And there's some issues with the standardization because the more standardized you get, the harder it is for an investor to gain an edge. And so in some ways, you kind of want things to stay disparate. You want things to be customized to the firm. But you now have a technology that could quickly create standardization within your own firm such that you could structure all of your data automatically. You put a layer of AI between your systems and the data ingestion engines that you have. And those may be email, it may be phone calls and meetings or whatever it may be. But you are taking in unstructured data constantly. And there are ways in which you can put an AI layer between you and that unstructured data, turn that unstructured data into structured data such that you can use it for whatever purposes you deem most useful. But that's a good point. So that's where we are today. And I give some examples, right, of generalist AI platforms. I won't get too far into this, but LLM side, horizontal agentic platforms like Beam AI or N8N, Manus, those exist today. You have some audio and video generation. You have coding app development. I mentioned some of those when I went through what's real. Then you've got some of these single point real estate AI solutions that exist out there. And then you've got some like your SaaS. And these are just examples of these that exist today. And there's hundreds of others that we could go through. I don't mean to endorse any of these. I'm just giving those examples. The question to ask ourselves, though, is where are we going to be 10 years from now? And if we can predict where the puck's going, we can hopefully skate to the puck and be ahead of our competitors. And that's ultimately what we're all trying to do here. We're all trying to beat the next guy. And so, like, I don't have an answer. Well, I have a guess. If there's anything I've learned, it's like my guesses are wrong. But I think directionally I'll be right. But trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down a country road at night with no lights while looking out the back of the window, right? The only way to predict the future is to have the power to shape the future. That's some of why I, having spent 20 something years in the business as a practitioner, all of a sudden lifted out of a firm, comfortable place where I was president and I could do fun investing stuff. And all of a sudden I'm launching a AI agentic platform for commercial real estate. It's like, okay, if I want to have some say in where the future of our industry goes, I should play a role in shaping that future. So that's what we're doing at CRE Agents. But this is my prediction. Again, current state off to the left, very much human-centric execution still, even in spite of the single point solutions that exist and the AI tools that are out there and all that. Very much siloed tools. I think all of us have experienced this. Like Yardi doesn't speak to Argus, which doesn't speak to Excel very well, which doesn't speak to our email at all, which doesn't speak to our video conferencing software. It's all siloed software. There's no orchestration. Orchestration meaning some digital entity that coordinates all those things. Very much manual handoffs. So you might have a repetitive task, and maybe you've helped optimize that repetitive task, but the handoff from that repetitive task to the next is manual. That's the switchboard operator analogy. And our processes right now are built around human limitations. So we spent earlier a couple minutes building an amortization web app. But if you think about what is a web app is a backend, so code that produces something, an output. But then most of it is the front end, is the user interface that we all use. And why does the user interface exist? Because we have to be part of the process. And as humans, we have limitations. We can't read code. And we need to see the whole picture so that we have the context that's necessary in order to understand the output. And so all this time is spent building this nice, pretty front end, that nice, pretty web app. That's a human limitation. A world is coming where you don't need a CRM. You don't need a CRM. Most of a CRM is a pretty front end so that we can like digest what's happening. But if you have an AI that's doing it, what you really need is to know, what phone calls do I make today? What information do I need to tell the people that I'm talking to today? Or what information do I need to know for the phone calls I have today? I don't need to see a report. I just need those instructions. And so right now, the technology is built for our limitations, which is, okay, there's not someone who can say to me, hey, Spencer, you're making these 5 calls today, and this is what you need to have for those calls, or even not even so. Like as I'm on the call, it's there in whatever format I need it to be there, so I can perform that call in a way that's most effective. But today, yeah, our processes are built around human limitations. And then finally, AI today is largely a bolt-on feature to the existing tools that we use. Where I think the future of this technology looks like is that we are AI native. So AI native means it's an agent-centric execution, agent speaking to AI. So execution is performed by these digital entities that work on our behalf. There's a workflow-oriented platform. So rather than like siloed tools, you have like a sequence of things that need to happen. So if an offering memorandum comes in the door and I'm sitting on an acquisitions team, what happens from the moment that offering memorandum comes in until I sell the asset 10 years from now? There are a sequence of things. They're not linear and they're not deterministic, but there's a sequence of things that happen. And so that will be mapped out probably by AI. And those things will be performed largely by these digital entities with human oversight. I'm not at all suggesting that we're out of the loop, but I think you have very much like a workflow oriented process that's highly orchestrated.
Yeah. Let me pause and go back a little bit. I feel like that's even a bottleneck right now is all these groups, these funds, they say like, hey, we're taking deal criteria, send your deck to whatever. That email should be AI at, ffrealestate.net, because the second it emails, it should get underwritten with no human decision to do anything. Like it shouldn't get kicked off. Somebody sends you an address, AI should kick off a value that your firm values that address or that parcel at. And it's funny because that's what we have in a CRM at its most basic level. People can contact us on our web form. You send us an email and we spit back an automated email. But AI can do that step and run the 99-step checklist just based on one person sending you an address and say, hey, would you guys buy this? What would you pay for it? And that's incredibly powerful that it could extrapolate a estimated value and kick off.
That's absolutely possible today, right? So that is not a pipe dream in the future. That's exactly what Stablewood has done and other firms are working on doing, right? This idea of, okay, let's create an engine that will automate some decision or at minimum automate a no. It's always hard to automate a yes because you want some human judgment, but it's easier to automate a no. It's like, okay, this does not check certain boxes. That is a no. And so you can imagine a world though soon where the digital coworker, I prefer that term to AI agent because AI agent actually doesn't mean a whole lot. I like digital coworker. The digital coworker sitting in a brokerage firm who has put the offering memorandum together and has been instructed to send it to the buyers that are most likely, based on the data that they have, most likely to be interested in that deal. That digital coworker sends it to the digital coworker at firm ABC and says, here's the latest. Is this a fit? And 15 seconds later gets an answer back. No, it's not a fit for these reasons. Keep us in the loop for the next one. Right? And we don't have to spend any of our time doing that stuff. We spend it on producing the relationship in the first place. Like that email was originated because a broker had a conversation with a seller. That's where we add real value. That OM and that email was produced because some judgment was made by a seller that now is the time to sell. And some judgment was made by a broker. This is the price that you should sell at. Like that's absolutely the sorts of roles in which we add immense value.
But it's so weird to me because I feel like what you're saying is the email that gets generated from brokerage digital worker it's not a glossy PDF anymore. It's literally a text file with a series of inputs and colon, and it's going to just look like a data file, and they're going to look at those and generate a yes. And then and the digital coworker at the brokerage and say, would you like a you know actual photos or live photos or something? And then the digital coworker at the real estate firm is going to say, yes, please generate for my humans. And then that's when the photos get generated, and it'll be custom. It's going to say like, for you know Woodbridge, because we know you guys care about proximity to highways, we're going to highlight the traffic intersection that's nearby. And then every set of OM is going to be unique to whatever data they have about you as a buyer and what you value, of like, oh, maybe they're a redevelopment play. Hey, it comes with an extra 2 acres. You're really going to love this. Hey, it comes with extra 10 acres of land you could develop. And then in that way, when you get to the humans, you actually send the pieces of data that influence a human, as opposed to the pieces of data that influence the digital underwriting, digital coworker.
Incredible point, Ron.
Wild.
First, I would argue that, like, why are OMs so pretty? It's because of that they're trying to appeal to the humans that read them. The digital coworker doesn't care about the pretty pictures. It cares about the deal itself. And in some ways, that's a good thing. Actually, in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. Like, then we're not influenced by the glossy picture. We're influenced by the facts. That's one. The second, though, which is the bigger point, if you recall, we started this episode with me saying one of the big unlocks of this technology is the ability to create bespoke solutions. And so what you're describing is a bespoke solution. It's, in essence, an OM specific to the buyer.
And that's what I would do if I was a seller and I had unlimited resources and unlimited time. I would create custom everything for every single buyer. I would send it to 100 shops, and I would say like, hey, their principal, they historically like rail access. So if my site has rail, I'm putting that on page 1, rail spur access. And it's what you would do if you had unlimited resources. Obviously we don't with humans. So we try to one box, one size fits all. But the bespoke solution will ultimately extract more value for the sellers, because they're going to find the best buyer for their property.
Yeah, no, that's a really good observation. I watched or listened to a podcast a couple of weeks ago. It was about marketing, but talking about marketing, you could actually have a marketing message to every single one of your clients that's distinct and specific to your clients. Like that's possible today. There's some cost to it, right? Because every one of those, you're going to have a few cents that you're going to have to spend to produce, and not. So today we try to do that by writing their name at the top of the email. Hi,
first name,
right? But imagine, and this podcast went so far as saying, there's a guy who's building a tool that will take your, like, a picture of you head to toe and then put clothes on you. And so they can help you like pick your wardrobe. So you do that, and then it like looks at your skin color and your eye color and your hair color, and it says, oh, you should be wearing this sort of color, and that you should like go ahead. So it like creates a and I don't know this stuff. I'm not that fashionable of a guy, but apparently this is something that's out there. But what he was proposing is, and I think it's a higher end product, he would literally find pictures of people and create a design palette for that person, and then just email it to them and say, I created a design palette for you. And I think ultimately his product was he would sell the clothes, and this product, this tool, would be free to those who bought clothes through them. But the point is bespoke solutions, bespoke communications at scale. And what better way than to produce unique OMs for every single buyer out there, specific to what their needs are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we experimented with there's a tool called HeyGen, and it is really wild how it was focused on text to video, but you would send them a video of you speaking a bunch of connector words and the A's to the N's and the A's to the T's. The challenge that I felt with that was I was using it to make automated videos to clients where it was like, "Hey Spencer, I just got done looking at that lease for you. These are some of my comments." And I didn't think there was much value in video versus just sending an email. Like the original text was really what you wanted. And for a lot of people, they can read way faster than watching a video, even at 2x speed. And so I dropped it. I was paying for their thing, but it's an interesting concept if you can crack that barrier of delivering information customized in a format that the user wants. That's really what I see. The customization has to be what they want. But in the OM scenario, it is delivering what they want because they want to know these features that they will pay more for. So I don't know. I'm trying to think from a marketing perspective, like how do I create custom videos or how do we reach our clients with video?
Yeah. So when we coming back to future state, I'll just wrap this up and then we can get into further Q&A. So what this means though is, okay, when you have digital entities that are always on, that don't get tired, that can run an unlimited number of workflows at once, right? So I can only do one thing at a time, maybe two. And the only way you get scale is you add more and more people. But imagine you have this incredibly powerful digital entity continuously on and autonomous, doing those highly repetitive things for you. It just means that things happen at a speed at which they haven't happened before. Like one of the weaknesses of our industry is it takes way too long to get to a yes, way too long. I imagine a world in which that's condensed. Some of these decisions that take weeks or months. And if you're on more of the boutique side of this business, you might go months, weeks and months. I can get a decision in 24 hours. The institutions are not that way. Institutions take weeks to get responses. And oftentimes they'll have like a fast track method to get you an answer in a week, right? You can imagine speed at this where you could get a much faster response. And so I think what it does is it condenses the speed of everything, our transactions. The world in which we could decide to buy a property in the morning and own it that afternoon. I'm not sure that's coming because of limitations around jurisdictions and
Legal. Legal will
legal
slow you
and all
down.
that. At some point that day will come where you could buy real estate with a click of a button. That's probably not in the 10-year period that I put into this future state. But certainly decisions are going to be happening a lot faster, and what you can do happens much faster. The last piece is AI becomes essentially your core operating layer. And we lift up and we focus on making investment decisions. We focus on managing relationships. We focus on strategic thinking. And this platform, we operate on this AI platform. I'll stop sharing and I'd love
Yeah.
just to talk
No,
through on what's on your
thank you,
mind.
Spencer. I really appreciate your overview. I think you have done a ton of research and you're the expert in where the AI retail AI is, right? Because think about the AI that's not even released to the paying people yet. I am sure that it's not ready for prime time. But no, I really think that you have to implement it. And it's almost like no matter what level of investor you are, if you're small, you need it to leverage to compete with the big boys and to be fast, because I'll tell every single seller values speed. And there are a lot of brokers that will recommend your offer, even if the purchase price is lower, if you've been fast, if you've always been responsive and you promise them I will close quickly. Sellers value that and they attribute real money, 10-20% of the price, maybe not 20, but 10% of speed. So I think that can give you a real edge. And yeah, it's exciting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, what I'll say is if you're listening to this, you must become AI native. Okay, so what AI native means is everything you do, you ask yourself, can AI I know it's a big meaningless term, but can these sorts of generative tools, can they help me with this particular thing? And spend a week where everything you do, stop and ask and it could be the silliest things, like you're starting your car. It's like, can AI help me do this better? And the answer is no, right? But the point is, every little tiny thing, you start asking yourself that. AI native means that AI is injected into everything you're doing. And now the question then is why? Okay, so Spencer's saying that you have to become AI native. The first answer, the first why is because the next guy, your competitor, is going to become AI native. They're going to do things 10 times as fast, and they're going to do 10 times as much. So either 10 times, that either means at 1/10 the cost or 10 times as much. That means you lose. Right? That's the first why. That's the big why. And I don't mean to inject fear, but that's the reality, right? Like this is happening.
What's
The
the
second, okay, go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead.
No, so the second point about why, the second big why, which is like one that matters to me, is it's really about time. Okay, so the longer I'm on this earth, the more I understand Warren Buffett's. I don't know if you've heard Warren Buffett talk about time, but he in essence says, and I'm just paraphrasing, the longer you are on this earth, the more a minute is worth and the less a dollar is worth. And there's reach a moment in your life where a dollar is worth nothing and a minute is worth an infinite amount. Okay, and so the only appreciating asset you really have is time. And there has never been a technology that unlocks time in a way that this one has. And so, okay, ignore that. Maybe you disagree with me and you're going to be able to still keep up with the next guy or whatever. Who wouldn't want to become AI native and unlock an immense amount of time for them and the people that they care about?
Well,
Anyway, so
let me play the devil's advocate, because I know what you're saying, and some deep core part of me agrees with you, but I've been exposed to Excel for a long time. Like, I had it on Windows 95, never learned how to do macros. It's not a skill I'm proficient in. At my peak, I was like, using Excel for 45 minutes without touching the mouse. Okay. But I've never done macros in the sense that I said, I'm inputting data from this table. It will save me time if I do it 3 times, and I code this to work. What's the difference with AI now versus why isn't every small boutique investor using macros, or I don't say VLOOKUPs, but you know what I'm saying? Like, Excel had code writing VBA. What's the difference now?
it's about friction to adoption. So every one of these efficiency steps has some cost associated with it. Either it's in terms of I've got to license some software, and then I've got to spend time to learn it. I've got to change my process in order to have this new thing fit in. And that cost exceeds the benefit I get.
For what time
And
period,
so we
though?
all do these little mini cost benefit analyses on everything that we do, right? And sometimes the cost is the inconvenience. Sometimes the cost is social. Sometimes the cost doesn't make a lot of sense, but there's always some cost associated with it. The cost, though, of efficiency has dropped to a very low rate. So let's just use your macro example. So what's the cost to write a macro that makes that Excel workbook slightly more efficient? Well, first off, you've got to know VBA. You've got to learn how to use the Visual Basic Studio on the back end. You've got to learn how to actually add the developer ribbon to your Excel file. Okay, all that is a cost. That's friction.
Yeah.
You're busy.
Something
And you're
I've
going,
never
oh,
done.
and I have to.
I've never taken that step, even though obtusely or abstractly, I knew that could save me time on every single model I produced, but I felt like it was saving me a minute, but it was going to cost me 700 minutes up front. And I was like, well, I don't know, but maybe I haven't done 700 models since then. Maybe I've done 1,000. But I guess the point is, I made a decision. Was it the correct one back then? I still think so, probably. That's such a high skill, but now the cost is like 1 hour, 60 minutes, and it's going to save you 5 minutes per model, something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the point. Is first the great example is that amortization table, a web app that we just created together. Okay, so that amortization web app that we just created It took us 3 minutes to do, plus knowing to go to lovable.dev. That was literally the cost. And what used to take, the cost to produce that used to be a degree in software development. Now the cost is a quick chat with ChatGPT to produce the prompt, which we didn't really need to do, and knowing where lovable.dev is. And there's other tools, by the way. I don't mean to be a proponent for Lovable. There's lots of them, and they're all comparable. So the cost has gone way down to produce something like that. Now, that doesn't have a lot of utility for you and I. Who cares about a web app tool? But if you're an AI native, what you start doing is you start thinking about all the things that you do on a day-to-day basis and going, okay, could AI help with that? I spend 30 minutes on that every single day. If I spent 30 minutes one time and AI watched me do it, and then it did it every time after that.
So I see a perfect use case for your little note, because this is something that I actually do in my law firm right now. Is when we draft promissory notes for real estate transactions, we go to one of the free sources and we produce our own amortization from somebody else's web interface. But we could natively introduce that to automatically just run a script and pull the inputs from the legal document and generate the exhibit automatically, because right now there's a human step where we still go to the web interface and we put in those 4 or 5 inputs. But I actually think it's more. I think there's more, like 8 or 9. There's a lot of things you can check the box, but it could pull that from the legal document, and the code could be embedded, because on the websites that I use, they don't necessarily give you the code, but now it could save those steps.
Yeah. And you or someone on your team, and that's no disrespect to you or someone on your team, you now can do that where before you couldn't. Before you'd hire a developer, which A, there's a cost, and B, there's a friction of like finding the person who knows how to do this, or I got to go up on Upwork and find some random person who may or may not be competent to do it. Now you can do it. And so the friction to producing that sort of innovation, those sorts of efficiencies, has gone way down. And to the point where you know your competitors are going to be doing this. That's to my point number one. You kind of have to do it. Unless you're late career and you're like, I'm just going to sail into the sunset. But if you're anywhere with a reasonable amount of time left in your career, it's inevitable. So why not be one of the early adopters of it all?
Well, what are some examples? Like, is this the Palm Pilot? What happens if we throw ourselves into the Palm Pilot and it goes the way of BlackBerry? What are the odds that that occurs for this platform of LLMs? Or
yeah, so what you're asking is what if large language models, because that's really most of what we're talking about for our industry. What if large language models become obsolete to something new? I mean that's a possibility, but were you behind because you chose the Palm Pilot? No. If anything, you were actually better equipped to adopt the BlackBerry, in the same way that when you were better equipped to adopt the iPhone after the BlackBerry, right? So I mean, imagine you'd never done any of those, and all of a sudden the iPhone comes around.
Right.
With like, it's a different sort of person who has adopted some of these technologies and kept ahead. And there are some of these waves that you go, okay, well, they're not significant enough for me to spend my time jumping on that wave. This is one that's going to fundamentally change society for good and for bad. I don't think any of us have a choice. Either you get on the wave or you get rolled over.
Right.
And I'm sorry if that sounds extreme. I don't mean to be fear-mongering, because I generally am a AI bull, but this is clearly going to fundamentally change everything that we do. And I think the sooner all of us learn to become AI native, the better we're all going to be, better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my own underwriting process, and it's a huge time suck. And I even think I'm pretty efficient at it because I'm in the same market, I'm in the same zoning. I keep seeing, I have a pretty good idea. If you tell me the address and I go to Google Maps, like, I'm really good at that. But the difference between me doing it fast and even if I'm awesome at it is 30 minutes, 45 minutes to put together a pretty decent file versus 0, versus 1 second, because I'm not doing heavy computational Argus with, renewal probabilities and discount mortgage debt constants. I'm just doing simple straight amortization, trying to get to a yes or no number. To do that instantly means that I could look at a lot more, 10 times easily. And
Yeah.
what would that do to your investing if a broker sends you something and instantly you send back a offer? You could even chug it into an LOI and not even care and just send it back to the broker. You could simultaneously receive, underwrite, send offers, and then if the number is wild, you'd never have to go under PSA and be like, oh, sorry, AI.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily give it that sort of autonomy, but I could imagine you wake up every morning and here's the 5 deals that fit your criteria. You say to it, hey, let's put an offer in on deal number 2. It drafts the LOI for you, sends it off, and then it lets you know when you've got a response. Like all of that's possible today.
Well, that is the future. I really see that where, we distill the human importance and you just work on those things. Off-market deals suddenly might become more important, but maybe not, because maybe the sellers know that they're going to get top dollar if they put it on the market. So off-market maybe means less. So instead it's going to be about who has better underwriting or lower cost of capital or some different assumptions, and it'll be exciting. So, well, yeah, thanks so much for joining, Spencer. It was an awesome conversation. I mean, I learned a lot. I was already kind of on team AI, but you really just nailed it home that you got to start implementing it now. The benefits to learning it are just going to compound, and can't afford not.
Look, and I respect those of us who want to live in a log cabin, unplugged for the rest of our life too. So don't hear me as being disrespectful for those who don't jump straight on the AI bandwagon, but I have some pretty strong sense for where this is going, and especially to the young people, become AI native.
Awesome.
It'll serve you well. So
All right,
thank you, Ron, for having me on. This has been a fun time.
I'll drop your links down below if people want to contact you.